His own mother stood by and watched, as his stepfather beat him like an animal. But the exact second Eric's breaking point snapped, a devastating game of vengeance officially began. Our story begins with a young boy named Eric. It's a quiet dinner, until a single mistake shatters the silence. Eric accidentally drops his fork, and in an instant, the entire atmosphere shifts. His stepfather isn't the type to let things slide. Without a word, the man locks the door and begins teaching Eric a brutal, agonizing lesson. Eric's own mother knows all about this savagery, yet she stands by and does absolutely nothing. In her mind, she convinces herself that this abuse is necessary, that the sheer terror will somehow force Eric to become obedient. After the brutal beating, swallowed by a toxic mix of rage and agony, Eric is forced to do the unthinkable. He steps forward, shakes his stepfather's hand, and humbles himself before the very monster who just broke him. This systematic violence has become the normal baseline of Eric's existence. And as we know, violence only breeds more violence. To release the suffocating rage trapped deep inside his chest, Eric begins taking it out on his classmates. One afternoon, he completely loses control, viciously beating his own friend within an inch of his life. The surrounding students just stand there, paralyzed in absolute silence. No one dares to step in, because everyone is terrified of Eric's explosive wrath and his fearsome reputation. Fed up with the relentless bloodshed, the principal finally reaches his breaking point. He summons Eric to his office and, without wasting a single breath, expels him on the spot. His tolerance for Eric's toxic behavior has officially run out. Eric, however, couldn't care less. But as he turns to leave, the principal fires off one final, ominous threat. Meanwhile, desperate to secure her son's future, Eric's mother has already pawned off the family's most valuable artwork to build a tuition fund. When Eric returns home, she instructs him to meet with her lawyer friend, Gunnar. Gunnar steps forward and hands Eric his business card, telling the boy to call if he ever finds himself in deep trouble. Eric just stares at the card, completely stunned and speechless. The moment Gunnar walks out, his mother's facade cracks, unleashing her deep disappointment over his expulsion. But then she drops a bombshell. She has already enrolled him in a new school, St. Jarnsund, a strict, all-boys boarding school. She makes it terrifyingly clear, this is his absolute last chance. She expects him to take it seriously and to never repeat his past mistakes. Looking at his mother, Eric nods, promising to change his ways. He vows that this time he will keep his head down and finish his education, no matter what. He commits to burying his anger, breaking his toxic traits, and forcing himself into a life of rigid discipline. When Eric finally arrives at St. Jarnsund, he looks like a completely different person. Dressed in a pristine uniform, his hair cropped short, he is introduced to his new roommate Pierre, widely known as the sharpest, most intelligent student in the entire school. The two boys strike up an immediate bond, and Eric quickly realizes that Pierre is genuinely friendly and remarkably level-headed. As darkness begins to fall across the campus, Eric and Pierre head toward the massive dining hall for supper. It's there that Eric crosses paths with another student named Johan. Johan leans in, offering a chilling warning. Every school has its hidden traditions, and in this place, your entire worth is dictated by a ruthless social hierarchy. The moment Johan finishes speaking, the tension in the room spikes. A middle-class boy sitting right next to Eric is suddenly summoned across the table by two wealthy students, Otto and Dylan. Coming from powerful, aristocratic families, Otto and Dylan run the school like their personal fiefdom, routinely terrorizing anyone they deem beneath them. They have absolutely no fear of expulsion, because their families wield immense influence over the institution. To make matters worse, both are high-ranking members of the student council, giving them the official authority to discipline and punish other students at will. After dinner, Pierre sneaks away and invites Eric to join him for a secret smoke. At first, Eric flatly refuses. His mother's parting words echo in his mind, and he is determined not to break a single rule. Johan steps in too, warning them that the consequences of getting caught would be devastating. But Pierre insists they are perfectly safe, smoothly reassuring him until Eric's defenses crumble, and he finally gives in. The next morning at breakfast, Otto and Dylan decide to initiate the newcomers. They summon Eric to their table under the guise of a traditional welcome initiation. But Eric looks them dead in the eye and refuses to move. Eric's defiance, however, comes with a brutal price, and it's Johan who has to pay it. Enraged by the blatant disrespect, Otto unleashes his fury on Johann, striking him over the head so violently that the boy is severely injured, forcing the medical staff to carry him away for urgent treatment. That very night, Otto and Dylan decide it's time for another round of hazing, and this time, Eric is their sole target. They call him into their headquarters, pointing to a filthy, towering pile of boots on the floor and ordering him to clean them. But Eric isn't the type to bow down. He defies their orders once again, turning on his heel and walking straight out of the room. Dylan is pushed to the absolute edge of sanity. He whirls around to Otto, his voice shaking with rage, demanding to know how they are going to handle this kid. Otto, chillingly calm, tells Dylan to leave Eric alone, for now. When Eric returns to his room and recounts the entire showdown to Pierre, his roommate's face goes completely pale. Pierre desperately warns Eric never to ignore Otto and Dylan again. He explains the brutal reality of St. Jarnsund. Any student who dares to defy the council is subjected to a relentless, living hell. But Eric, having been a ruthless bully himself, completely dismisses the threat. He scoffs, making it crystal clear that he isn't the least bit intimidated by them and has zero intention of following their twisted rules. Later that night, Eric and Pierre sit up, desperately trying to brainstorm a way to fight back against Otto and Dylan's psychological warfare without resorting to physical violence. But it feels like a losing battle. The systemic fear in the school runs so deep that most students find it far easier to simply submit and endure the humiliation rather than risk a brutal beating. The next day, the Cold War turns hot. While walking down a narrow corridor, Dylan deliberately collides with Eric. Brimming with arrogance, Dylan demands an immediate apology. Eric stands his ground and refuses. He didn't do anything wrong. Dylan was the one who slammed into him. This outright rejection sends Dylan into a blind rage. Unable to handle the public disrespect, Dylan challenges Eric to a fight, demanding he show up at a designated spot later that night. Panicked, Pierre and Johann try everything to stop Eric from going to the clearing. Pierre warns him that it's a trap. Otto and Dylan never fight fair in a one-on-one. They always bring their entire gang of lackeys to ambush and crush their enemies. Initially, the old, violent Eric wants nothing more than to accept the challenge and tear Dylan apart. But just as he is about to step out, his mother's desperate plea flashes through his mind. He remembers his promise. He has to keep his record clean if he ever wants to graduate. Gritting his teeth, he forces himself to swallow his pride and walks away from the fight. Back in the safety of their room, Pierre hands him a cigarette, trying to ease the suffocating tension. Meanwhile, out in the dark, freezing field, Otto and Dylan wait for hours. When Eric never shows up, Otto's arrogance swells. He scoffs to his inner circle, loudly branding Eric a pathetic, cowardly rat, sending a wave of mocking laughter through his loyal followers. The victory is short-lived, however. The next morning, Otto gathers the student body, publicly targeting the rebels who dare to defy the student organization's absolute authority. And at the very top of that hit list is Eric. Staging a mockery of a trial, Otto exploits his absolute power as student council president to sentence Eric to a grueling 1-month detention. His punishment? Eric must dig a trench 1 meter deep around the entire perimeter of the school. The brutal manual labor drags on late into the night, making it impossible for Eric to finish on time and forcing him to eat his dinner in complete isolation in the empty dining hall. As he sits there alone, a cafeteria worker named Marja quietly approaches him. There is a deep, unspoken curiosity in her eyes. She softly tells Eric that he reminds her of her brother, a boy who was just as stubborn, who refused to bow his head before any authority. Following his usual habit, Eric lights up a cigarette after eating. Suddenly, Marja slips back into the room, catching him off guard. She warns him that the smell of smoke will get him into trouble, but then the dynamic instantly shifts. Moving entirely on impulse, she steps into his space, wrapping her arms around him and pulling him into a passionate kiss. Both Eric and Marja are acutely aware of the school's absolute taboo. A romantic relationship between a student and a staff member means catastrophic consequences. Eric would be permanently expelled, and Marja would be fired on the spot. Yet, in that stolen moment, the looming threat of the rules completely evaporates. When Christmas break finally arrives, Eric returns home. His mother welcomes him with open arms, but his stepfather's venomous nature hasn't changed a bit. The man immediately launches into a ruthless interrogation, demanding answers about Eric's mounting detentions and disciplinary record. Eric answers with cold honesty, explaining that he simply refused to take orders from a spoiled boy belonging to the school's most powerful aristocratic family. Hearing this, his stepfather scoffs, brutally mocking him, insisting that a boy of noble birth demands absolute respect and total obedience. Using the poor report card and school punishments as twisted justification, the stepfather unleashes his belt, whipping Eric once again. His mother, fully aware of the systematic torture, willfully closes her eyes to her son's agony. The moment the holidays end, Eric rushes back to campus. The very first thing he does is run to find Marja, having desperately missed her every single day he was away. Under the soft glow of the moonlight, the two reunite, holding each other tight and finally confessing their hidden love. Meanwhile, the moment Otto and Dylan realize Eric is back on school grounds, their sadistic minds start plotting a new prank. Under the cover of darkness, they sneak into his room, drenching a sleeping Eric and Pierre with filthy, freezing water. The cruel trick works. The boys jolt awake, forced to clean up the foul mess. But this time, Eric refuses to just take it lying down. He wants blood. Gathering the remaining buckets of sludge and mud, Eric stealthily sneaks into Otto's private quarters. He cuts the lamps, casting the room into darkness, and pours the entire load of filth directly onto a sleeping Otto. The following morning, Eric orchestrates his revenge in the middle of a packed dining hall, raising his voice so every student can hear. Mockingly sniffing the air, he loudly asks the room about a disgusting stench. He paces through the tables, acting as if he's tracking the foul odor, until he stops dead in front of Otto, who is quietly eating his breakfast. Eric leans in and barks, "Hey, can you smell that?" Humiliated in front of the entire student body, Otto snaps. Losing all composure, he drives a vicious punch straight into Eric's face, brutally beating him. But despite the heavy blows, Eric refuses to throw a single punch back, holding on to the promise he made to his mother to stay out of trouble. What makes the scene truly chilling is that the principal and the faculty are sitting just a table away, calmly eating their meals, pretending absolute blindness to the violence. Disgusted, Marja steps in, sharply commanding Otto to stop. Realizing they completely failed to break Eric's iron will, Otto and Dylan are consumed by a quiet, toxic fury. They realize they need a new strategy, and they find it by shifting their crosshairs to Pierre, Eric's roommate and his only true friend. At lunch, Otto summons Pierre to his table, but Pierre flatly refuses, knowing he has done nothing wrong. But Otto isn't a monster who accepts rejection. The moment the final bell rings, he challenges Pierre to a formal fight, threatening severe consequences if he fails to show up. It is a calculated, deeply sadistic chess move. Otto and Dylan are intentionally targeting Pierre to bait Eric out into the open. They know Eric won't stand by and watch his best friend get torn apart by a pack of wolves. Their true trap is to isolate Eric, ambush him with overwhelming numbers, and make a brutal example out of him so no one ever dares to defy the council again. That evening, trapped with no choice, Pierre walks out onto the clearing alone, facing Otto, Dylan, and their entire gang of lackeys waiting in the shadows. Pierre tries his absolute best to fight back, but his scholarly frame is no match for their sheer physicality. With effortless cruelty, Otto lands a heavy blow, sending Pierre crashing to the dirt. Eric is nowhere to be found, and his best friend is left broken, bleeding, and utterly humiliated, a helpless target for the gang's mocking laughter. By the time Eric finally arrives at the clearing, it is already too late, and despite his burning rage, he is powerless to stop what has already been done. Eric immediately scoops up Pierre's broken body and carries him back to their room. He tenderly dresses his friend's wounds and urges him to rest. Once Pierre falls into a heavy sleep, Eric slips out into the dark. That very night, Eric crosses paths with Marja, and surrendered to the shifting tides of their lives. The two find solace in each other's arms, growing closer than ever before. The next morning, consumed with anxiety over Pierre's condition, Eric rushes back to their room. But the sight inside freezes him in his tracks. The room is completely hollow. Pierre is gone, and all his belongings have vanished with him, making it devastatingly clear that he will never step foot in this school again. He left behind nothing but a single letter, apologizing for his sudden flight. In it, Pierre writes that Eric was his one true friend, and he leaves him with a parting command: never back down. He urges Eric to keep up the fight against the brutal tyranny of Otto and his council, to wipe out the systemic injustice infecting the school once and for all. As Eric reads those final words, something shifts permanently inside him. His true, unbridled fury and an unbreakable resolve finally break their chains. He vows to avenge Pierre and every single student who has ever been crushed beneath Otto's cruelty. Without wasting a single second, Eric storms into the dining hall. He cuts off Dylan's path, looking him dead in the eye, and challenges both him and von Skeenen to a merciless showdown in the arena. Exactly 1 hour later, Eric stands alone in the circle, staring down Dylan and von Skeenen. Both bullies loom over him, boasting superior size and reach. But these monsters are nothing but empty arrogance, cowards who hide behind their parents' wealth and societal leverage. Eric, a naturally gifted and battle-hardened fighter, dismantles them in a matter of minutes, leaving them broken and eating dirt on the arena floor. Turning his eyes to the crowd, Eric locks eyes with Otto, issuing a chilling threat. Otto is visibly paralyzed with shock, unable to comprehend how Eric effortlessly crushed his two most formidable enforcers. Eric stares into Otto's soul and delivers a clear promise. He is next. But before dealing with Otto, Eric races toward the school kitchen, desperate to find Marja. There, a female staff member stops him, delivering a crushing blow. Marja has been fired and has already left the campus for good. She presses a parting letter from Marja into Eric's hand. First Pierre, and now Marja. The sudden loss of the only two people who cared for him tears Eric's world apart. But the tragedy doesn't stop there. One of Otto's loyal spies catches Eric receiving the note from the kitchen staff and immediately sprints to tip off his master. Sensing blood in the water, Otto storms Eric's room with his lackeys, ordering them to ransack his belongings. It doesn't take long before they unearth Marja's letter. As Otto reads the words, the secret romance between Eric and the staff member is laid bare. Otto now holds the ultimate weapon, unquestionable hard evidence to ruin Eric forever. Without losing a moment, Otto marches the proof straight to the principal's office. Summoned immediately, Eric is handed an instant, unceremonious expulsion for his grave violation of school rules. Eric accepts his fate with quiet dignity. However, he begs the principal to return Marja's letter, the last remaining piece of the woman he loves. The principal coldly refuses, locking the letter away in his desk drawer. Now, officially expelled and with absolutely nothing left to lose, the fire of vengeance that had been building throughout his entire time at St. Jarnsund completely consumes Eric. He sets out onto the grounds to hunt his ultimate enemy. Tracking Otto through the estate, Eric corners him as he walks entirely alone through the dense woods. Blocking his path, Eric raises a heavy wooden stick, his voice echoing with absolute authority as he commands Otto to drop to his knees. To Eric's sheer amazement, the terrifying tyrant vanishes instantly, and Otto drops to the dirt, trembling in absolute horror. Paralyzed by fear, Otto frantically tries to bargain, offering Eric a desperate bribe of cash just to spare his life. But Eric flatly rejects the pathetic offer. The moment Eric raises his weapon to strike, the cruel, untouchable bully shatters completely. Sobbing hysterically, reduced to a weeping child begging for his life. The terror is so overwhelming that Otto literally gets sick to his stomach, throwing up right there in the dirt. Eric steps closer, grips Otto's face, and coldly tells him that he isn't going to take his life, because unlike Otto, he is not a sadist who finds joy in crushing and torturing the weak. Leaving the broken bully behind, Eric heads back to the school to pack his things. That's when he remembers Gunnar, the lawyer who had handed him his card and promised to help if things ever got desperate. Without wasting a moment, Eric places the call, and within no time, Gunnar pulls up to the gates of St. Jarnsund. After filling Gunnar in on the nightmare, Eric marches straight into the principal's office to face him one last time. The principal is sitting there, casually enjoying drinks with his senior staff. Eric makes a final appeal, asking him to revoke the expulsion and return Marja's letter. At first, the principal scoffs and flatly refuses. But right on cue, Gunnar steps into the room. The lawyer drops a bombshell, threatening to expose the school's systemic caste discrimination, unchecked violence, and toxic hazing culture to the entire world, vowing to prove that the principal and his faculty actively chose to look the other way. Trapped with no cards left to play, the principal is forced to surrender. He grants all of Eric's demands, rescinds the expulsion, and permanently dissolves Otto's corrupt student council. To make a long story short, Eric is profoundly grateful to Gunnar. He can finally stay at the school, knowing the tyrannical reign of Otto and his lackeys has been completely uprooted. From that day until graduation, Eric enjoys peaceful, undisturbed days at St. Jarnsund. On graduation day, his mother beams with absolute pride, watching her son cross the stage. His stepfather, however, is still seething with rage, fixated entirely on Eric's less-than-perfect behavioral evaluation. The moment they get home, the man prepares to unleash his belt and whip Eric just like old times. But this time, Eric strikes back. He stands tall, looking the monster in the eye, and fiercely declares that violence will never enter this household again. Eric finally kicks his abusive stepfather out of the house for good, breaking the cycle of trauma once and for all. With a promise to reunite with Pierre someday, Eric's story of survival and struggle reaches a beautiful, triumphant conclusion. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this.